Peace and life, family. I hope that you are well and happy and whole and all that good stuff. My intention today is to discuss binding rituals and loosing rituals. I want to identify what is a bind. How do you know if you are bonded to something? How do you know if a binding ritual has occurred? And I also want to share some things you can do to loose yourself from these binds, okay? And we're going to do this quickly because I don't plan to be before you long, huh? so let's get into it. Now, first off, I got to shout out my church folk, huh? Anybody who comes from a church background, a Christian background, you may be familiar with the term, I bind that in the name of Jesus. We bind that to heaven, okay? And I'm going to explain how that came into play as well. But first, let's explain what is a bind, okay? A bind is simply a tight secure, to be tightly secure to something. It also can mean to be restrained or refined to be constrained to. Okay, so anytime you are tightly secured to something, you are binded to it. Anytime that you are restrained to something or refined to something, you are binded to it. Okay, I want to be clear about that. Now, I also have to be clear that binding is not just a person. Oftentimes people talk about binding rituals. And yes, a binding ritual occurs from person to person, but also, family, you can be binded to beliefs. You can be binded to substances. You can be binded to things. Again, a bind is a tight, secure attachment, a bond. You can be bonded to substances, to things, to people, to places. You can be bonded to any of that. When someone attaches the intention to secure you, to tightly connect you, to confine you or restrain you to something, someone, a place, when they attach that intention to a specific practice, that is a binding ritual. Okay, so a bind is a tight, secure attachment, refined, restrained, constricted. A binding ritual has occurred when someone has intentionally chosen to do a practice with the intent of securing you or attaching you or confining you or restraining you or confining you to something, someone, or someplace. Okay, so now that we know what a binding ritual is, let's discuss what a loosing ritual is. A loosing ritual is when you do something to loose yourself from a bind, to loose yourself from an attachment to a person, a place, or a thing. That is a loosing ritual. Okay, so you are intentional about breaking the bind, to break every chain. Okay, to break the chain, the connection to. All right. Now, I have to be clear about this. Family, we talk about binding rituals, and now that we know what it means to be binded to something, I got to be clear when I say you will know a binding ritual has occurred when you feel that there is no control in your ability to disconnect. When you feel that there is no control when it comes to your ability to back away, to leave the person alone, the thing alone, the place alone. If you feel that you cannot walk away no matter what you do, no matter what you've done, there's a possibility that a binding ritual has occurred. That is how you will know. But I have to be clear about this. There's a difference, y'all, between ordinary heartbreak and a binding ritual having occurred. There's a difference between going through the woes and the grief process of a relationship and, I think this person done put something on me. A lot of times we want to run straight to, it's the juju. We want to run straight to, they must have put something on me. They must did something to me because I can't leave them alone. And we think that's what it was. But sometimes, y'all, you may just be grieving a relationship. You may have, you may just have not let that person go go or let that place go. Okay, so that may be what you're going through. So I don't want you to be in the midst of heartbreak and assume that this person did a binding ritual to you. I want you to be able to identify that, hey, I may be in grief, but I will say this: you will know a binding ritual has occurred when, again, you do not have the ability to freely walk away, to freely leave it alone. No matter what you do, you can't stop thinking about the person or thinking about the place or thinking about the thing. When you just can't let it go, no matter what you have done. You've prayed it away, you tried to sleep it away, you try to do everything you can. You've been to therapy, you've done everything you can, and it just, that bond will not break. That attachment, that chain will not break. There's a chance that a binding ritual has occurred. And I also have to, remind y'all that sometimes folks do binding rituals and they're not aware that it has been done. Okay, so let's discuss that. Sometimes binding rituals are done consciously. Okay, in the binding rituals we commonly think of are like the love spells. People do the juju jars and you got your honey and your cinnamon and all that. I ain't about to tell y'all how to do a binding ritual like that. You know what I'm saying? but y'all know them. Y'all be seeing the folks out there giving you recommendations on love spells and juju jars and things like that. And that's a binding ritual. That's an intentional, conscious binding ritual. Even when people do the things like taking someone's lock, right, like a part of their lock, and they intertwine another person's lock or interlock another person's lock into their lock. You're connecting their DNA with your DNA with the intent of keeping them with you, tightly securing them, binding them to you. That is a binding ritual. People exchanging blood, right? So having sex while on your menstrual cycle, or putting your menstrual blood in someone's food or drink or something. Y'all know back in the day, people would tell you, don't you eat at that girl house. They'll used to tell the guys, don't you eat spaghetti from no woman house, because she may have put some blood in there to keep you connected to her, to tie you to her. That is a binding ritual. So there are very overt, conscious binding rituals that occur. But y'all, sometimes there are subconscious binding rituals. And I got to be clear, because with the subconscious binding rituals, again, subconscious means that you may be aware that this is happening, but you're not focused. You're not, intentionally trying to do this, but it kind of just like, it kind of just happens. Sometimes it's unconscious and you aren't even aware that this is happening, nor is this your intention or focus, but it's just happening. So subconscious and unconscious binding rituals occur in a couple ways. When it comes to relationships with people, especially like a lover or a partner, when you are engaging in the act of intimacy with the intention of putting it on them so good that they're going to keep coming back, that is a binding ritual. And I know that may shock some of y'all, but that's just what it is. That is a binding ritual. And let me explain why. A ritual is a practice that is done with specific intention. When your intention is to bind, is to tightly secure them to you, that is a binding ritual. So when you are practicing the act of sex, which involves a DNA exchange, and your intention is to put it on them so good that they keep coming back, that is a form of a binding ritual. Okay, you are literally bonding or tightly securing that person to you. That is a form of a binding ritual. And if that, you may not be aware that, hey, it's not conscious. You're not saying, I'm going to have sex with this person to do a binding ritual. But again, it's kind of subconscious / unconscious, because you may not even be aware of this. But when you are engaging in that practice with the intent of doing it so well that you are binding them to you, they're going to keep coming back and keep coming back. That is a binding ritual. And I know some of y'all is like, well, if I ain't doing it with the intention to keep them coming back, then what we doing it for? I know some of y'all thinking that. And hey, that's true. But when you know better, you do better. So if you know that your intention is not to have this person be binded to you, okay, if you know that it's not your intention, you need to clarify that with your spirit, guys. Clarify that with the ancestors. Clarify that with spirit, and let it be known that, hey, free will. Okay, that we are enjoying this moment, but the intent is free will. Enjoyment and free will. Okay, we ain't trying to bind nothing. So you may want to erase that intention from your mind when you are engaging. Okay, so be mindful of that. Another subconscious slash unconscious binding ritual heavily occurs with generational beliefs, generational habits, generational trauma, generational curses. Okay. A lot of folks, come to me and they're struggling with addiction. They are struggling with a bind to a substance, to alcohol, to things like that. And a lot of times it's because it's coming from a generational habit that they are binded to. It comes from a generational trauma, a generational curse that they are binded to. And that was passed down unconsciously sometimes. Sometimes it wasn't the intention, the full aware, focused intention of your family to pass this down. They were just doing this because that is what they did for generation to generation to generation, and they thought it was okay. Sometimes their intent was not to harm you. Their intent was just to raise you, and they passed down this trauma to you, and you are now bonded to it. That ritual, that practice of passing on that trauma, of passing on that bad habit, that has become a ritual. It's become a practice that is done over and over from generation to generation to generation. So some folks have been binded to generational beliefs, trauma, curses, habits that are just unhealthy. And the binding ritual occurred when you were being raised. The act of raising you was the ritual that binded you to the belief, to the curse, to the trauma, to the habit. So again, when it comes to binding rituals, a lot of times we just quickly jump to relationships and we quickly jump to love, but that binding ritual has occurred our entire life. You have been binded to a lot of different things, so the question is, what do you want to be loosed from? Which, let me quickly touch on that church lingo. Again, a lot of folks will say, in the church, they say, we bind that in the name of Jesus. We bind that in the name of Jesus. And people, even myself, when people would say, we bind it in the name of Jesus, so we bind that, I was thinking that bind means to loose. But really what they were doing, what they were saying, we forbid that from the body and we bind it to heaven. We are binding it to Jesus. We are binding it to God. We are sending it to spirit and letting them handle it. So when they were saying we bind that, we send that up, we bind that, we remove that, and we attach it to God. We attach it to spirit. So oftentimes that's where the term loose came in, and they would say looser, or think about like woman, thou art loose. Shout out to TD Jakes. Woman, thou art loose. Woman, thou art loosed from the binds, from curses, from trauma, from hurt. So when we do loosing rituals, a loosing ritual is done to detach you from that tight, secure attachment, the bind. A loosing ritual is done to detach you from the bind, to break the bond. That is the purpose of a loosing ritual, okay? Now, again, I want to be clear about that, because I know some Christians, a lot of folks grew up in a Christian background, and you are now, returning back to your hoodoo roots and to your various ATRs. And, we think about binding rituals, but a binding ritual is the ritual that is done to attach, to secure the attachment, to bond you to something, to bring you closer to something, to refine you, to restrain you, to confine you to something, okay? That is what the binding ritual is done, which is also, it can be done through love spells, it can be done through sex magic, it can be done through a variety of different things, okay? It can be done through, again, just simply the act of raising a child is a form of a binding ritual in many cases. Now, when you want to break that bind, when you want to break that bond you have with the person, with the place, with the thing, you will know you are ready when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. That is how you will know you are ready to break the bind, okay? To break that bond. And I want to be clear about this. I'm about to give you a quick, or I'll say Two quick options for easy, very easy loosing rituals. And these loosing rituals could be done to loose you from the binds of a person, a place, a substance, a thing, anything. Okay, a belief, a habit. Do this loosing ritual or these loosing rituals. Choose which one is best for you. But I gotta tell you right now that you gotta want it. You gotta really be ready to let it go. You cannot practice this loosing ritual with the intention of returning. If anything in your body is not ready to let go, you need to be aware of that. Okay? You need to be aware of that. All right? And it's okay to be honest and integral with yourself and say, I'm not ready to fully let go. And just go ahead and live it out. Shout out to Queen Mother, Auntie, Spiritual Guide, Big Sister Badu, where she said, she was talking about relationships, and she said, when you keep going back and keep bumping your head and bumping your head and bumping your head and keep going back and keep crying and keep breaking down, and when you're ready to end the relationship, you ready to let it go, you go let it go. So this is for the folks who are ready to let it go. You are ready to break that bond. You are ready to break that secure attachment. You are ready to be free from the restraint, the confines. You are truly ready to let it go. This is a loosing ritual. Okay, now let's get into the loosing ritual, okay? And this is for the folks who are ready to let that thing go, all right? Now, there's an acronym that I'm going to give you. Within this acronym, you have two loosing ritual options. I'm going to tell you how to do both. I'm going to tell you what you need for both. The acronym is BBL. Get into it. BBL. The loosing rituals acronym is BBL, and BBL stands for burn, bury, leave it. Burn, bury, leave it. BBL. Burn, bury, leave it. Now let me tell you what you're going to need. The first thing you're going to need is some form of their DNA if it's a person. Some form of their DNA if it's a person. If it's a thing, you need a piece of or a part of that thing. So if it's a substance that you're addicted to or something like that, you need a piece of or a part of that thing. If it's a place, you need something to represent that place. And it could be dirt from the grounds of that place. It can be anything. Okay, so and this is what I advise, if it's a belief, and it's a belief that was poured into you or drilled into you during childhood, you need to go get some dirt from the grounds of where you grew up from. Okay, try to, if you can, get some dirt from the grounds of where you grew up from. But you need something to represent that thing, something to represent what you are trying to break the bond from. If it's a person, it needs to be their DNA, especially if the binding ritual occurred with blood. So if the binding ritual with the person occurred from having sex on the menstrual cycle or from doing anything dealing in the blood, this is why I said before, when we talk about binding rituals and people, use their menstrual blood and things like that, it's blood in and blood out, because you would need some blood from that person. And I'm not advising that you go get some blood from that person by any means necessary. You know what I'm saying? I'm not advising that. But that's how it would work best, just honestly speaking. But at the end of the day, you just need some form of DNA from that person, okay? So it could be hair, it could be fingernail clippings, it could be saliva, it could be anything. With whoever you're trying to break the bond from, you need some form of DNA from that person, something to represent that person. If you can't get any DNA, at least just get a photo. If you can't get a photo, just get a piece of paper and write their name on the paper. But you need something to represent that person. And this also could go for if it's a belief or if it's a place. If you can't get any dirt from the grounds or anything that represents that place, or the place where that belief was drilled into you, get a piece of paper and just write it down on the paper. But it needs to be something in there that represents what you are trying to break the bond from. It has to be something that's mandatory. Okay, so we got that. Now I'm going to also need you to get either a white candle, a black candle, or a red candle because you will need some candle wax. A white candle, a black candle, or a red candle. You need the wax from the candle, okay? Especially if you're doing the bury it, okay? Because again, BBL, you have the option to burn it, bury it, but you have to leave it. Those are the two options, burn it or bury it. But especially if you're going to bury it, you need the wax from the candle, okay? Now, you have your candle, you have your representation of whatever it is you're trying to break the bond from. The next thing I need you to do is gather your herbs. Now, here's where you need to take notes. I'm about to give you a list of possible herbs that you can use. Okay, I'm about to give you a list. Bay leaf, blessed thistle, cayenne pepper, comfrey, skullcap, horsetail, curry powder, gunpowder, black pepper, salt, anise, clove, bladderwrack, clover. Now I'm going to tell you now, the bladderwrack and the clover, this is especially useful if there is some type of financial dispute. Okay, this is the clover, not the clover. The clove is good for any issues with a person breaking any type of like binds or bonds to a person. Clove is good, but the clover and the bladderwrack is good, especially if there is some type of financial money dispute going on, some type of debt that you're breaking the bond from. That is good as well. Okay, so those are a list of herbs you can use. I advise at least 5 of that combination. So if all you could get is the curry powder, the gunpowder, the bay leaf, the salt, the black pepper, the cayenne, just get at least 5 out of that list. Now, what you are going to do, you are going to get, it could be a piece of paper, it could be anything, a piece of paper towel, something, some old newspaper, something, okay? I don't care what you get, but you need to get something that is flammable, okay? That's why I said preferably paper. In there, you are going to place the herbs. Start with the salt. Okay, the salt is mandatory. Everybody got to get the salt. But you're going to have your piece of paper. You're going to put your salt. You're going to put the name or the DNA or whatever you have from the person. Put your other herbs on top of that. Then you are going to take your candle, light your candle, and you are going to melt the wax from your white, black, or red candle over it. And as you are doing this, you are reciting your intention. And your intention is to break any binds. You are loosing yourself from any binds that you are connected to, that have a hold on you, that you are secured to. Okay? So as you are adding each herb, you are saying, the bond is broken. The bond is broken. I am loosed from the bonds of, insert name, insert person, insert place, insert belief. You are loose from the bonds of, as you are adding each herb, as you are adding the DNA or whatever the representation is, you're loose from the bonds of, okay? Now, this is going to be the key. It's going to be the key. Okay? You got to leave out your house. So you got your piece of paper, you got your newspaper, you got whatever, all of that is, you got your herbs and your DNA and everything, your photo or whatever, your piece of paper with the name on it, whatever representation you have of the person, you got that. You done dripped your candle wax over it, okay? And you have said that you are loose from, as you've added everything, you've said your intentions. You are going to close that up, wrap that paper up, fold it up, drip more candle wax on the outside. Okay, again, you are loosed up because you are sealing it. You are loosed up. You're going to step out your house. You got to leave out your doors. Okay, now this is where it gets because I heavily advise that you go to a graveyard, a cemetery. You can go to the crossroads. Just try to go far away from your home. But if you can't get far, cool, okay? But this cannot be done inside your house. Anytime you're doing anything for release, it cannot be done inside of your house. You need to go outside and you need to burn that. Burn it, Okay, so you got it should be folded up because you don't need no big old nut. It should be folded up in a little piece of paper. It's sealed with the wax. You set it on fire, you burn it, okay? And if the whole thing doesn't burn, that's fine, because the ashes and anything that's left, you are then going to bury it. You can make a small hole. It don't got to be 6 feet deep, okay? But make a hole that you are comfortable in size with. The deeper, the better, of course, but you want to bury it. After you bury it, sprinkle some salt on top, turn around, and walk away. This is the leave it. So, you've done your BBL. Okay? You've done your BBL. You've burned it. You've buried it. You are going to leave it. When you leave it, you will not look back. You are not going to turn around and look back at all. Okay? Do not look back. And that is a simple loosing ritual. And the reason I said you have 2 options is because some folks, you may not need to bury it. That is okay. If you've burned it to a crisp, that is fine. Burned it, it's nothing but the ashes left. Just dig the ashes into the ground, lay your salt down, turn around, walk away. You may not necessarily need to bury it. Okay, so if you burned it to a crisp, you may not need to bury it, but just dig the ashes in, lay your salt down, turn around, walk away. But the key with the leave it is do not look back. That is the key with the leave it. Do not look back. Okay, go home, smudge yourself down. You got your windows open and stuff. You smudge yourself down, cleanse yourself off, take you a spiritual bath or a spiritual shower if you need to, and that is it. It is done. Okay, it is done. So I hope this video helps, family. We discuss what is a bind, what is a binding ritual, how do you know if a binding ritual has been done, how do you know if you are bonded to something, okay? And also we discussed a loosing ritual. How can you loose yourself from a bind? I hope this helps. I'll see y'all soon. Much love and peace.